Julia Oehmke. This is my home. Welcome. I'll show you around a little bit about some of my work. I am an Indian lover, so you'll see a lot of my Indian paintings. To start, this right here is a very famous Indian of the Sioux tribe, Gary Silk, which he has passed away a few years ago. But he came through Illinois right at the end of Clinton's presidency, and I got to meet him then and was able to photograph him and paint him, which I'm so happy I did. He came to retrieve his war bonnet because, according to him, it wasn't honored, and he rode horseback all the way from North Dakota, and that was wonderful meeting him. Another Indian is this Miguel, who I met in California, and he was a wrestler at San Diego University, and he was so interesting that my friend Jan Schweeder, a attorney in town, and myself just wrote a book about him, and we just loved the story. It was a contest downtown, and we wrote the story, and I didn't win, but we embellished on the story. And his little lavalier that he wears, Jan says, why don't we focus on that and write a story about him with that? And so we did. And it's a lovely book, a lovely little story about him. Jan, I know she wants to write a large novel now, but I think it would take away from the small story. Another thing with my Indians was the Windy City Art Group in Chicago. We did the kites. It was a kite show, and it was held at the Chicago Cultural Center. That's also Gary Silk. I put him in a lot of my pieces. I wish he could have seen everything I did before he passed away. He was a Sioux warrior, and he did Rider in the Storm. And in fact, I named that piece Rider in the Storm because he wrote the story of how he felt about his tribe and about the Indians. And I have that paper that he gave me. Thank God. I love it. And so when I did do that painting, I named it Rider in the Storm. That has been, they used that when they did a tribal walk. I forget what those walks are called, but about 10 years ago, they asked if they could use that, and they put it on their T-shirt as they did the walk. So that was a wonderful thing. Now this is a piece of 5 African women. This was in South Africa, and my friend went there, and these girls were standing on the corner, and she asked if she could photograph them, and they said yes, they do accept money if you do photograph them. But it was a great shot, and they were so beautiful that I thought I have to make them different, so I elongated them. So it was a little bit different, but that's one of my favorite pieces. And I always, for years, painted women and what they stood for and what they did in life. So that's why I painted the women on the Ganges, because their life is so beautiful and different. And I love the India people. Well, one thing they do wear is a lot of silk, and their silks are vibrant and colorful. That's what I loved about painting them. And I just think they're beautiful. And they wash their clothes and they bathe in the Ganges, and I think it's just lovely. Everything I do is oil. This is a piece I painted primarily for the bicentennial show that I'm doing at the Cultural Center because it is Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King who both fought for the same thing, uh, the proclamation, and I have a dream. And I will have a plaque on both sides, on one on each side, with their speech. So that's why I painted this. It was because of their similarities. This will be the focal point for my side of the exhibit. I wanted this to stand out because of what they fought for and what our country means to us. And I think that's Illinois. This, to me, is Illinois. When the piece hanging on the wall here is a triptych that I started, I did about 15 years ago at the Botanical Gardens, and I love the Botanical Gardens. And I couldn't get enough into one piece of canvas, so I decided to do a triptych, which is 3 canvas in one put together. I also studied sculpting with Coverilla in the city, which they're marvelous. I have Amelia here that I did at the studio, and there's another one I could show you over there. But this one I did of my granddaughter, and I kept the original piece of clay because I think the raw clay is so beautiful, you know. So, but I've sold most of my pieces, so I don't have that much left. I mostly do figurative work because I get into the soul and the whole feeling of a person. I can't get much feeling into doing trees and bushes and flowers, but when I paint people, I love to capture that soul. The process of painting is, I could never put a brush down. I love it. But when you're working with clay, it's like you're molding that person. I can't explain it, but I would never want to give up either one. Well, I had so many girlfriends that I said, there's a beautiful place in Indiana that is called the Passion. And it's, in fact, Bill Curtis did all the speaking parts when you walk the path. So I said to the girls, come on, let's go over there and sit down at that table where Jesus is, and I'll paint you. You could be all the disciples. So that's what I did with the girls. And since I have lost a few of them, but I treasure this piece because of my girlfriends. The Passion is in St. John, Indiana, and it is the way of the cross, and it is just beautifully done, and it's but almost 2 miles of a path that goes around and does all the stations, and at each station is a box that you press the button, and Bill Curtis tells you what station it is, and he, tells you all about it. It's a marvelous place. At each of the stations is a sculpture of Jesus with the cross, carrying the cross, and each time he fell. And then at the last station is he's nailed to the cross. So it is really a beautiful place. If you just want to take a walk, my husband and I go there, park in the back, and take a walk on the 2-mile path. It's very calm and serene. Humanity part is entered when you're painting. It's well, it all goes. I think it all goes together. Humanity, spirituality, but I don't mix the two together with my paintings. The only one I mix together with my paintings is that of the girls. But it's mostly the human aspect of my paintings. I think I got so interested in the American Indians because we started very early in our marriage, Ken and I, going to Santa Fe and Arizona, but especially Santa Fe. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the Indians. And every time I went, I met someone else, another Indian that I would paint. In fact, all of my Indian paintings, except for Gary Silk, are gone. They're all sold. And I miss them all. But some I've made prints of them because I miss them so much. But I did mostly the women, mostly women in Santa Fe, and making pottery and all the joys of their life or sorrows of their life. Gary Silk that I painted, when he came here, he had uh, a woman with him that was his partner. They weren't married, but it was his soul and his partner. And her name was Zita. And they came with two horses, Ska and Ponzi. And I painted all of them. I painted her, I painted the horses, and mostly all those paintings are gone. I'm so happy they're in other people's homes, but you miss them. They're like your children, so, but I'm happy they have a home. So he came through Illinois with Zita on horseback and stayed at a friend of mine's home. She's a chiropractor here in town, Jeannie Quaid. And Jeannie called me and said, Julia, you have to get over here and meet these Indians the way you feel about Indians. So I went there and sat with them for dinner. And they have to really get to know you before they will really let you into their world. So that's how he gave me the right to paint him. Well, I grew up in Harvey, which was the greatest town in the world, and went to Thornton High School, along with Tommy Dreesen. Everybody knows Tommy Dreesen. So, and he talks about Harvey until you get blue in the face, so now I'm doing it. And went to Thornton, met my husband in high school, got married, had my son. In fact, that is my son up there. And moved to South Holland. And then from South Holland, we built this home. We've been here 21 years, and I love it. I love Crete. I thought I wouldn't love anything else but Harvey. But it's a wonderful town to live in, and it's filled with art and art people. And I have been in Latin Gallery. I was in Latin Gallery for a long time. Recently, I am not, but he's only 2 blocks from me here with his studio. Fabulous glass blower. And so that's why I love this town. It's got the right people. And I was a businesswoman also, along with my art and studying for 10 years. I had a business for 50 years. I was a hairdresser and had a business for 50 years. It went from Harvey to South Holland, and it was a wonderful business. But along with that, I went to school, studied, and I've been an artist for 30 years, so it's been a wonderful life. There's a group in Chicago that for the last few years have focused in on Shakespeare because it is Shakespeare time, 500 years of Shakespeare. So this piece I did for Shakespeare's show, and also the piece right here was in the Shakespeare show. And right now, we're doing authors from authors of Illinois, and those pieces are in a wonderful gallery in Hyde Park. I did Mark Twain, and I used my husband as Mark Twain, and he looks just like Mark Twain. So I used my husband with the dog because I read Mark Twain's story of the book is called The Dog Story, and it's a marvelous book, and every child should read it. But I know that that's how my husband feels about his dog, so I painted him with our dog to look like Mark Twain. So that's what's in the show downtown in Hyde Park. So this is Shakespeare. I painted not Hamlet. This is Shakespeare, and I put him with the stolen skull. That skull was missing from the body in the grave, and then I think it was recovered later, but it was gone from the grave, and so I put him holding the found skull. The one behind me, up above, is my mother, and the one she's looking at across the room is my husband's mother. And I lost them both, so that's who they are. This one I did them both from photographs. I did that one just before she passed away, but this one I did while she was in good shape, living. One of my favorite artists is John Sargent and Vermeer. So I always look through the books at his work and his fabric and how he performs material and silks and folds. But I just love working on fabric and faces. It's my passion. I have some. I sold a lot of them, but like all of these were Vermeers. Girl with a red hat. But I did all of them. The thing I learned about Vermeer, he was his surfaces. He used hard surfaces a lot. So all of my Vermeers that I did, I painted on copper. So I thought I bought copper. It cost me a fortune, but I bought the copper and had them cut, and all those works are on copper. This is my studio, and this is the piece I'm working on right now for my show. This is the water tower. One of my friends said to me, "Julia, did you paint the water tower yet?" And I said, "No, I paint figurative work, people." And he said, "No, you have to do the water tower." He said, "Because it was the only thing standing after the fire. So you want that." So I'm glad I'm doing it. So I went to the library in Dyer. It's a wonderful library. And I said to the girls, "Do you have anything on the water tower, Chicago Water Tower? Because I can't find anything of when it was first built." They found me this photograph, and it is exactly how it looked before the fire and right after they built it. So I was so happy to get this photograph, and that's what I'm working from. And I'll embellish on it when I get to a certain point, but right now I'm doing it what the picture says I'm putting down. So These are pieces I finished for the upcoming show, the Bicentennial at the Cultural Center. Frank Lloyd Wright, one of the greatest architects, and he also designed that stained glass that I put behind him. I love his work, so I want him in that show. Also, I wanted to put writers and poets and so the piece I did of Mount Rushmore. I put the writers instead of Mount Rushmore, as usual. I did my own interpretation of, and I'm not even going to tell you who they are because you're going to have to look at it and figure it out for yourself, and I'm sure it's very obvious. I think one of the greatest architects in Chicago was Burnham, who I think he was a great architect for our city of Chicago. Well, he did the World's Fair. He did the entrance into the World's Fair, so I put that in the painting. Also, getting back to Indians, the Trail of Tears went through Illinois. So I decided, well, I have to get my American Indians in there some way. So I did the Trail of Tears, and I'm not finished yet. I'll do more. I think I'm going to wind up with Sis Daly, because she was the one that saved the Chicago Cultural Center. It was going to be torn down, and she even fought her husband over this. He did not want that. He thought it should go. But she fought to keep that there, and it's the most marvelous, marvelous building. So, and that's where my show is going to be. So, it's a funny thing because when I put in for a show there, Crystal Warren, who is the director at the Renaissance Court building, she said, Julia, I'm going to give you a show in 2018. And I said, Crystal, I'll be dead by that time. That was 3 years ago. Well, all of a sudden, here it is. But I called her back and I said, Crystal, did you realize that's the bicentennial year? And she said, no, I didn't. And I said, I thank you very much because I will put on a great show for you. So, and I really like her. She's a great lady. Knowing that I am a mostly portrait artist, do all figurative work, I thought it would be a little boring if I didn't have other pieces with someone who did structure and streets and churches and movement, what happened in Chicago. And the only one I could think of that I really love her work is Sandra Holubow. So she was very excited to join me with that, and she's painting her little heart out. I think it's going to be a marvelous exhibit, and I'm really looking forward to it. This piece was done for a portfolio. It was a Chicago portfolio, and I was lucky enough to get in it. And again, I did an Indian, American Indian, with the Chicago skyline behind him. But it's a Potawatomi Indian because those were here at that time. It is a linoleum cut. It looks like a wood cut, but I am on the board of the Chicago Society of Artists, and they put out a calendar every year like this, and it's every artist does a linoleum cut. It's a marvelous way to do our fundraiser. So when Rene Arcio decided he wanted to do the linoleum cuts from this group and do it all about Chicago, I was sure lucky to get in it. So, but that's what that is. And that will be also in the show because it's another Chicago scene. I painted Lincoln and Martin Luther King, the small one first. And I loved it, but I thought, no, it doesn't show what they were and what they meant. So I'll still put this in the show, but that's why I did the big one. It had to be about them and how they changed. I just hope it stays changed. I hope this gives you a little insight of who I am and a little bit about my work and how I love it. And I hope you will try to make it to this exhibit because it's going to be a marvelous exhibit. We'd love to see you all there. Now, it's going to open on the 11th of May and it's going to run through July 5th, which is a nice long, and we'll be there for July 4th, the celebration. And our opening exhibit will be May 24th from 4 to 6:30 in the evening. So we hope you'll come. Please join us.